Today, we become legends.
So with a new season comes a huge meta shift, with sweeping changes like the stat reductions as well as specific buffs and nerfs. The 10.6 meta has changed quite a bit since my last update to this series in 10.5, and with the Pro League Masters LAN concluding yesterday, I think it's time for a new top 3 gods for every role. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and drop a like on the video if you enjoy these quick meta breakdowns, but without further ado, let's jump in with the solo lane. With 10.6 being very much a tank patch at heart, a lot has changed in the solo meta, and first up we have Raven, who has shot into the meta as arguably the top solo laner right now. He uses basically every top solo item right now really well, like Pribwin, Arc Druids, Binding, Glad Shield, etc. And Raven's innate tankiness through his shield, immunity, and damage reduction on the ult, combined with this patch making tanks tankier in general, has led to a situation where Raven feels unkillable at times when built full tank from the solo lane. The innate health shield buff was huge, and the meta absolutely favours him right now, definitely a top 3 solo. Next up is another new face that shot into the meta off the back of a buff, and that's of course Tear. Despite a small nerf to the free stats from his 3, the buff to Tear's ultimate allowing it to stun or deal 25% more damage was huge, and in a similar vein to Raven, Tear also uses a lot of the top solo items right now really well. He brings some of the best disruption available with his non-DRing CC chains, and is probably one of the only gods that rivals Raven for unkillability when diving due to his anti-CC passive, 3 movement skills, and general tankiness through the free protections of his 3. Tear is an insanely strong solo right now. So for this final spot, it was a hard choice between Wukong, Thor, and Jormungandr. All 3 of these picks are really strong right now, and you can't go wrong with any of them, but we can only choose one for the list, and I decided on Thor. He has a bit higher representation than Wukong, and Yorm has mainly been a force in the Pro League and less so in high-end ranked, but if you're looking for a high disruption magical solo, Yorm is rarely banned at the moment, but that could change given his performance at the Masters LAN. On to Thor though, similar to Raven and Tear, Thor of course abuses a lot of the strong items right now. That's kind of what defines a lot of the top solo laners. Being a great user of Manticore Spikes and Arc Druid's Fury to add even more burst to his already devastating ult combo, being able to rotate for beacons or Gold Fury super early due to his semi-global presence with the ult, and has a great teamfight late game as a bruiser. Thor's only minor issue is his early laning phase from solo. Before getting hammer maxed, he does struggle to clear a little bit and will lose some matchups until around level 9, but after that you can just farm up and look for Thor's strong points in his early rotations and team fighting. Also worth noting that Thor is still great in the jungle, but he sees more play in solo, so he's here for the list. But speaking of, let's move on to those junglers. First up is a returning face that's still strong in 10.6, Serket. She took a few nerfs after her insane performance last patch, but she's still inherently pretty broken. She has true damage and percent max health damage in her kit, which is an indirect buff in this patch due to tanks being more of a problem and even a lot of junglers building bruiser. Speaking of, Serket works great with that kind of bruiser build. She's always historically been very good as a tank, and she builds Manticore Spikes and Pribwin super well. You can still go more damage focused and do fine on her, but she has that option of also going some defense to keep herself alive in fights. You all know Serket, she's been a force in the meta for a while now, ever since she got that crit buff, and she's still a top 3 jungler in my book. Next up though we have Kali, who is more of a ranked pub stomper god, but even saw some SPL bans at Masters as well. She absolutely shreds through anyone, even tanks right now, with the revert to the percent pen cap and her innate pen in her passive. In uncoordinated ranked games, she's an absolute menace, as she really needs to be collapsed on and CC chained to stop her just running through your whole team. Yes, she has a weak early game, but most games right now are going the distance, and once Akali gets 6 slotted, she's almost unstoppable, and definitely a top 3 jungler right now. And finally we have Bakasura. We all know Bakasura is the farm king with Golden Blade and Eat Minions, so with a little bit more farm available in 10.6, that helps him out to get snowballing early. He's especially good in uncoordinated ranked lobbies, as it's hard to stop his invades and shut him down in fights, but even in the Pro League he sees significant play. If you're looking for one of the top hyper carry junglers right now and don't want to play Kali, Baka's your guy. Quick honourable mentions for jungle here, as I would be remiss if I didn't mention Erlang Shen, who has seen a great performance at Masters, and while he doesn't see much play in ranked and casuals, I think he's slept on right now. The buffs he got in 10.6 were no joke, and I think he's a great jungler at the moment. Oh, and also Ao Kuang is still really strong for ranked hard carrying, but I would argue not top 3 anymore. Moving into the ADC role though, we have not too much change here, other than Hachiman flying into the meta off some buffs since the last update to this series. Hachi has been really strong since 10.5, so I'm sure most of you know why he's here. His 1 autos hit insanely hard right now, he has great boxing with the extra attack speed, and is super safe in lane due to his ult being a get out of jail free card. I won't spend too long on Hachi since he's been one of the top meta gods for a solid month or so now, but he's still one of the top ADCs in 10.6. Cernunnos is similar, he's been meta for even longer, basically since the start of the season, and he remains strong. His level 1 clear and lane pressure allow him to get an early lead in lane, and if you can push that into some 1v1 wins or early rotations, he can absolutely pop off. His objective play is great too due to his extra shred from his passive and 1, plus his teamfight is also amazing thanks to that giant AoE polymorph. Sure, it got nerfed, but it's still one of the strongest teamfighting hunter ultimates in the game. Cernunnos is basically a jack of all trades who can do well in any situation and remains a top 3 ADC in 10.6. And finally we have Matikoros, who is just insane right now. He facilitates double hunter comps really well due to the shred on his ultimate and great use of fail not, but doesn't have to be on a double hunter comp to succeed, he stands on his own. For that reason he's also a popular mid pick with a different hunter in the ADC role for that double hunter goodness, but I have him in ADC for the list. He hits hard, is incredibly safe due to his ult getting him out of almost any bad situation for 3 seconds, where he can fly to safety or buy time for his team to intervene. Much like the other ADCs on the list, Mati has been strong basically since his release and remains that way. Sticking in the duo lane, next up we have the support role, and let's just get Umoja out of the way. If you keep up with all my top 3 gods for every role videos, you're probably sick of me hearing me say this, but Umoja is still fundamentally broken and brings things to the table that no other support really can. She's tough to play optimally, but if you're good with her, just play her right now. Let's move on. So next up we have a new face, and that's Terra, who's been having a really good performance in the Pro League lately, and even a few bans. Terra can pretty much do anything you need from support. She can initiate with her root, she can peel really effectively with her walls, she can ult more aggressively to hit more enemies and look for damage, or more defensively to hit more allies for those mitigations and heals. She uses popular items like Pribwin and Binding really well, and just has one of the strongest overall teamfight presences of any support at the moment. Her laning phase isn't particularly bad per se, but if you're looking for those beacon skirmishes, objectives, and huge 5v5s, you're looking at Terra. That's where she gets the most value out of her huge AoE root and ultimate. And finally we have Ganesha, who's had a meteoric rise to fame in the Pro League recently, especially at the Masters LAN, and I think the pros really showcase what this god is capable of. He has a surprisingly good matchup into a lot of the meta right now, with his silence cancelling Tia Fearless, stopping Thor's follow-up after landing an ult, cancelling Deathbane from Sir Kett, interrupting Erlang's long ultimate cast, even stopping Terra from exploding her monolith. That silence gets so much value in the current meta, and along with his ult shredding up to 55 procs away, which is really nice in a tank and bruiser meta, Ganesha is really just a meta answer at the moment and fills that niche super well. Honourable mention to Kuzumbo, who brings a ton of disruption to the field and feels unkillable with current builds, more popular in ranked than SPL, but I'm sure is still doing pretty well. Also Afro, who I think has fallen off a good bit, but is still a pretty strong support and worth mentioning, even if she's not top 3. And finally we have the mid laners, where to be honest, not too much has changed. Hebo remains strong despite the overall tank meta hurting his game plan of bursting people a little bit. You could argue for this either way though really, since nuking a backliner is now more valuable given there's less overall damage in the game. But he will struggle a bit into bruiser junglers and OP solo laners diving him as he's a little unsafe. Don't get it twisted though, Hebo still does Hebo things, and the addition of ethereal staff into mage builds helps him burst even more, while giving some extra survivability against the strong dive meta from jungle and solo. Merlin is next up, who again is a bit weaker into bruiser dives, but if you can keep him alive, he'll output some of the sheer most amount of damage of any mid laner at the moment. He's amazing for objective play, doing almost as much shred as an ADC in that regard, and he's also great for sieging and base defense as he can poke super effectively and deletes incoming minion waves like they're nothing. He has % proc shred on his 2 as well, which is underrated against the burst meta, and he uses the meta proc builds super well. E-Staff and Reaver are Merlin's wet dream in terms of item builds, and he's one of only a handful of mages that can truly shred tanks in this meta. And our final mid laner and final god for the video was a bit hard to choose. I considered Matikoros as I mentioned for mid lane, but he eventually went to the ADC role for the list. Hell is pretty damn strong right now as well, a favourite of the Pro League, but ultimately I think Baba Yaga remains top 3. Her damage is pretty much uncontested from mid right now. The only one that bests her for overall damage output is Merlin, but she's also a lot safer than Merlin due to her leap and ultimate. Speaking of that ult, it hits ridiculously hard and will shred through even tanks with the current 40% pen we're seeing from mid laners right now with Coin and Shard in one build. And while most mids don't build defense in this meta, though some kind of can, Baba Yaga main builds Prophetic Cloak, which makes her even safer against the strong dive from jungle and solo in this meta, and with junglers building more bruiser, she can just face tank their dive a lot of the time once Prophetic is online and her ult shield gets huge. Baba is still strong in 10.6. But that's it for the video. Let me know your own personal picks that you have success with down below, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can catch the next update to this series as it drops. Catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.